The first thing I noticed was the smell. Not Elena's lavender soap or the peppermint gum she kept in the cup holder. But cigarette smoke, wet pine, and cheap cologne. It made the cab of Hurt Ruck feel like a stranger's coat closet. The check engine light blinked while I reached behind the seat for the scraper. And my fingers hit wool. A man's jacket. Heavy and gray. Folded like somebody had tried to hide it. There was dirty snow ground into the floor mat and her coffee gone cold in the console. I checked the pocket before I could talk myself out of it. Motel receipt from off Highway 31. On the back, in blue ink, don't tell Mark yet. My name sat there like a warning. Before that morning, I would have told you Elena and I were ordinary in the safest way. 9 years married. 12 together if you counted the summer. She sold me a used kayak with a cracked paddle and laughed so hard when I tipped 10 feet from shore that she had to sit down in the sand. We lived in a small white house 2 blocks from Lake Huron, close enough for the wind to push the smell of cold water through the screens. The porch sagged. The back steps complained. All winter. The heater clicked and knocked inside the walls like an old man clearing his throat. We had routines that felt like promises. I made coffee too strong. She watered the basil even after it died. On Thursdays, we ate tomato soup and grilled cheese, because neither of us had the energy to pretend we were fancy. She'd sit across from me in wool socks, blowing on her spoon, reading strange headlines from her phone in a gray voice. No, listen, a raccoon broke into a bakery. Was he armed? She'd roll her eyes, but she'd smile. And for a second the kitchen felt warm. We didn't have kids. Not because we hadn't wanted them. The old fertility clinic calendar was still stuck to the refrigerator under a Mackinac Island magnet. The appointment dates faded from sun and steam. After enough disappointments, we stopped saying certain words out loud. We learned to step around that silence like a loose board in the hallway. Then Elena's mother died in November. Right before the first hard freeze. After the funeral, my wife changed in ways small enough to excuse and large enough to feel. She left clean lawn refolded in the basket. She stood at the sink with water running over plates, already washed. Her boots stayed wet by the door, then disappeared again before I knew where she was going. I've got to run an errand, she'd say, pulling on her coat. At 7? It won't take long. At first, I didn't push. Grief makes strange weather inside a person. And I loved her enough to give her room. But room became distance. Some nights she came home after dark, cheeks red from cold, carrying the smell of outside air and something else I couldn't name. It'd have soup warming on the stove, 2 bowls waiting, the heater clacking behind the wall. You okay? I asked. She'd kiss my forehead, not my mouth, just tired. Mark. And the quiet after that felt less like mourning and more like a door being locked from the other side. The calls started a week after I found Elena in the laundry room at 3 in the morning, holding one of her mother's old sweaters against her face. At first, I told myself not to notice. Then, the phone kept buzzing. By the 4th morning, I knew the time before I opened my eyes. 6:12. Not 6:10. Not 6:15. Always 6:12. As if whoever was calling knew the exact minute our house still belonged to sleep. Beside me, Elena's hand slid from under the quilt. Her screen lit the ceiling pale blue, then vanished against her ear. Yeah, she whispered. I'm here. She sat on the edge of the bed with her back to me. One slipper on, the other crooked, near the dresser. Something about that lonely slipper bothered me. It looked like proof she had been leaving in pieces before I understood she was gone. I know, she said. He'll come by before he wakes up. Then she stood, wrapped my flannel robe around herself, and went down the hall. The screamed or groaned. Cold air crept through the house and found my ankles. I got up quietly and stood at the kitchen window. Elena was on the back porch, hunched against the Michigan cold, her breath turning white. Across the alley, Mrs. Donnelly's terrier barked like Dawn had insulted him personally. I said I would, she murmured. Just hold on. Before he wakes up. The words stayed in my chest like ice water. Not before work. Not before breakfast. Before he wakes up. When she came back in, her cheeks were pink. She set the phone face down on the table and reached for the bread. "You're up," she said. Hard not to be. Her fingers froze on the toaster lever. "Who keeps calling you?" She pressed it down. "Church volunteer group. At 6 in the morning? They need help." "With what?" She didn't answer fast enough. "Elena," I said, softer than I meant to. "Please." She looked at me then, exhausted, her mother's ring hanging loose on a chain at her throat. "It's nothing bad," she said, but that was not the same as the truth. Our anniversary fell on a Wednesday. I left work early, bought Elena the sour cherry cheesecake she loved, and carried home a tired bundle of tulips from Gordon's Market. Half the stems leaned over in the paper, but I put them in a glass pitcher anyway. I set the good plates on the kitchen table. Lit 2 candles, and kept checking the clock while garlic butter cooled in the pan. At 6, I texted her, "Dinner's ready when you are." The 3 little dots appeared, then vanished. By 6:40, the pasta had gone gummy. By 7:15, candle wax had pooled on the saucers. At 8, the cheesecake was sweating under its plastic dome. Then my phone buzzed. "I'm sorry. Someone needs me." "Don't wait up." Someone. Not a name. Not a reason. Just a blank space big enough to swallow our whole evening. I stood there in my dress shirt with my sleeves rolled up, feeling foolish, in my own kitchen. I ate one for KFUL over the sink and dumped the rest. The pasta hit the trash with a soft, "What slap?" When I blew out the candles, the smoke curled toward the ceiling like it knew where to go. Elena came in a little after 11. The back door scraped open. Boots thudded on the mat. Something metal clanked against the wall. I was in the living room with the TV muted, blue light sliding over the furniture. She stepped into the kitchen carrying a red toolbox I had never seen before. Her hair was twisted into a loose knot, and a black smear cut across one cheek. The cuff of her sweater was dark with oil. She stopped when she saw me. "You're awake. It's our anniversary." Her face tightened. "Mark. That's all?" She lowered the toolbox carefully. I lost track of time. "With someone." She looked at the clean plate still waiting on the table. I said I was sorry. "What happened?" "It was just a furnace thing. Then a car thing." "For who?" She rubbed at the oil on her wrist and only spread it darker. "It doesn't matter. It matters when you disappear." Her eyes lifted, sharp for half a second, then tired again. "I can't do this tonight." I almost laughed. But it would have come out wrong. Apparently neither can we. She carried the toolbox down the hall. The bathroom faucet started running. I stayed with the untouched cheesecake, watching the cherry topping slide to one side, brightened ugly under the plastic. The next morning, I checked the bank account, and not proud of it. Suspicion makes a man feel both justified and ashamed. My hands were cold when I typed the password. There it was. ATM withdrawal. For $100. Cash. The day before. No note in our budget tab. No text. No envelope in the drawer where we kept emergency money. Just gone. The coffee maker hissed behind me. Elena's mug sat in the sink with lipstick on the rim. Her slippers were crooked by the basement door. One tipped on its side like she had stepped out of our life in a hurry. When she came downstairs, her hair was wet from the shower. She saw the laptop open and stopped. "What?" I turned the screen toward her. She didn't look confused. That was what hollowed me out. She looked caught. "What was the cash for?" Her hand closed around the back of a chair. "Something I had to take care of." "For $100? You'll put it back." That's not what I asked. The heater clicked in the wall. Outside, tires hissed over dirty snow. "Elena," I said, quietly. "Who is he?" Her mouth opened. For 1 second, I thought the truth was finally coming into the room. Instead, she picked up her keys. "I'm late," she said. Then she walked out, leaving her coffee untouched and me sitting there like a guest in my own marriage. I didn't follow her that morning. That's what I told myself. Anyway, I called my supervisor and said I had a migraine. There was a hard, bright pain behind my right eye. So it wasn't exactly a lie. Then I sat in my truck with the engine running, watching exhaust drift over the windshield, waiting for myself to become the kind of husband who trusted his wife. After 20 minutes, I backed out. Elena always turned left at the bait shop when she said she was going to the church. I took the lake road and came around slow, both hands on the wheel. The sky was flat and colorless. Dirty snow piled against the curbs. Mailboxes leaning where the plows had shoved them. I passed the church. Her car was there. 3 blocks past Maple. I found it parked in front of a narrow mint green house, with a sagging porch and yellow curtains hanging crooked in the window. A plastic flamingo lay half buried in snow beside the steps. I parked across the street behind a rusted pickup. My hands stayed on the wheel. I could hear myself breathing. Then the front door opened. An old man stood there in a brown cardigan, thin as kindling, one hand gripping the frame like the porch might tip beneath him. His white hair was flattened on one side. His socks sagged around his ankles. He wasn't handsome or dangerous, or anything I had been picturing in the dark corners of my head. He was just old. Elena came up the walk, carrying a paper grocery bag against her hip. When he saw her, his face changed, not into a smile exactly. Something softer, something relieved. That was what hurt. She set the bag down and reached for him. He folded into her arms, and she held him for a long time, rubbing slow circles over the back of his worn cardigan. His face pressed into her shoulder. His shoulders shook once. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles went pale. I tried to force the scene into the shape I feared: motel receipt, cash, done calls, done tell Mark. But there was no flirtation in her body, no quick glance around, no spark of secret pleasure. There was grief, there was tenderness, and there was secrecy, which somehow cut deeper. The man said something I couldn't hear. Elena took his face in both hands, careful as a daughter. He nodded. She wiped under one of his eyes with her thumb. My memory rose up sharp and unwanted. Elena at her mother's hospital bed, fixing a blanket the nurse had already fixed. She gets cold, she had whispered, though her mother hadn't spoken in 2 days. Elena had always needed something to save with her hands. The old man shuffled back inside. Elena picked up the grocery bag and glanced down the street. I ducked before I thought. My heart beat like I was 16 and ashamed. When I looked up, the mint green door was closing behind her. I wanted to knock. I wanted to demand the truth. Instead, I drove away. In the rearview mirror, the house grew smaller, holding my wife and some piece of her life I had not been trusted to know. By the time I got home, I had circled side streets for nearly an hour. I sat in the driveway with the engine off, listening to the truck tick itself cool. Beyond the bare maples, the lake was the color of tin. Our house looked ordinary enough to hurt: porch light burning in daylight, one gutter sagging. Elena's cracked clay pot by the steps. Inside, the quiet felt staged. Her reed toolbox sat in the hallway, shoved half under the bench where we kept gloves and old takeout menus. I stood over it for a long minute. Then I opened it, telling myself I was only looking for a wrench, knowing that was a lie. The top tray held screwdrivers, electrical tape, a flashlight with bite marks on the rubber end. Underneath, wrapped in an oily rag, was a phone. Not Elena's phone. An old silver flip phone, scratched at the corners, the kind men used to wear clipped to their belts. My mouth went dry before I opened it. The battery was almost dead. The little blue screen showed 3 missed calls from Elena on the texts. I shouldn't have read them. I know that. But my thumb moved before my conscience got up. Did you eat? Then I can't keep lying to him forever. I sank back on my heels. The furnace kicked on beside me, breathing warm dust across my ankle. I stared until the words blurred. Me, I thought. Of course it was me. The phone buzzed in my palm, so violently, I nearly dropped it. A new message from Elena lit the screen. Same place tonight. Please bring the papers. My fingers closed until the plastic creaked. Papers. Cash from our account. The motel receipt. The man in the mint greenhouse holding my wife like he had been waiting for her all his life. All those little wrong-shaped pieces suddenly locked together. And the picture they made was uglier than jealousy. It was humiliation. Then I heard her car in the drive. I folded the phone back into the rag, slid the tray into place, and shut the toolbox. My heart was beating so hard I could feel it in my teeth. The back door opened. "Elena?" I called, and my voice sounded calm enough to frighten me. She stepped in carrying a pharmacy bag, cheeks red from the cold, hair coming loose from her clip. Her eyes went from my face to the toolbox. "What are you doing home?" I could ask you the same thing. "Mark." Just my name. Not an explanation. Not comfort. Eye warding. The prescription label on the bag was turned inward so I couldn't read it. I looked at her and asked, "Who needs papers tonight?" The color drained from her face. That was the part that broke something in me. Not the silence. Not even the secret. It was that she didn't pretend not to understand. Elena set the pharmacy bag on the counter like it might break. For a moment, all I heard was the kitchen clock and the drip of snow melt from her boots onto the linoleum. "Mark," she said softly. I hated how badly I wanted my name in her mouth to fix something. "Don't," I said. "Don't say it like I'm the one who came home carrying another secret." Her eyes moved toward the mudroom, where the toolbox sat half hidden under her coat. "You went through my things," she said. "I went through my garage. My house." My voice cracked. "My life." Apparently, she flinched, and some tired reflex in me wanted to apologize. That scared me more than the anger. I pointed at the bag. "Who is the medicine for?" She pressed her lips together. I laughed once. "Empty." "Of course. It's not what you think." "You don't know what I think." "Yes, I do." Her eyes shone. "That's why I didn't tell you." I stepped back and hit the table. A chair scraped the floor, loud as a shout. "So, this is my fault now?" "No." "Then who is he?" "Ilana?" She looked down at her hands. "Read from the cold." The skin split around her wedding ring. I remembered those hands in a clinic parking lot years ago, gripping mine after a doctor said unlikely in that careful, professional voice. Back then, she had held on like we were the only two people left. Now she couldn't even look at me. "I saw you at the greenhouse," I said. "I saw him hold you. I saw you wipe his face like my throat tightened. Like I was the person you came home to anymore." "You followed me?" "I found you." "That isn't better." "No," I said. "But neither is lying." She covered her mouth. For a second she looked older than grief. Older than the funeral. Older than every quiet dinner where I had pretended not to notice her leaving the room to answer that phone. "HES sick," she whispered. "Lots of people are sick. HES alone. So am I." The words came out raw and ugly. Elena closed her eyes as if I had struck something true. "Is he why you took the cash?" She nodded. "The motel." His heat went out. He had nowhere safe to sleep. And he begged me not to call anyone. "Why you?" Her face folded, but she held it together. "Because he trusts me." That answer hurt more than I expected. I turned to the sink and gripped the edge. Huh. Her car sat crooked in the driveway, salt crusted on the doors. Everything looked ordinary. A pharmacy bag, wet boots, a marriage coming apart beneath a humming fluorescent light. "Tell me all of it," I said. "Right now." "I can't." Something inside me went cold. "You can. You're choosing not to." He asked me not to. I turned back slowly. "He doesn't get to make rules in our marriage." A tear slipped down her cheek. I asked the question I hated myself for needing. "Do you love him?" "Not like that." "Then, like what?" She hugged herself, trembling, like someone I should have known my whole life. I stared at her, and the room seemed to tilt. Before I could ask what she meant, a muffled ringtone began inside the toolbox. Thin, desperate, small. Elena's face changed. Not guilt, fear. She ran past me toward the mudroom, and I didn't stop her. I stood with one hand on the sink, listening to that hidden phone ring, realizing the secret was bigger than betrayal and somehow not less painful. Elena dropped to her knees by the toolbox and fumbled with the latch. Her hands shook so hard the metal snapped twice before it opened. She pulled the little flip phone from the rack and answered it with both hands around it, as if she were holding something wounded. Len? Her voice broke. Len, slow down. I stood in the doorway. Frozen. Not honey. Not baby. Len? A plain, tired name. A thin sound came through the phone. A man crying. No, Elena said, closing her eyes. You didn't do anything wrong. Put the envelope back in the drawer. I'm coming. My anger stumbled, lost its footing. She looked at me then, and something in my face must have told her the hiding was over. She lowered the phone from her mouth. "It's not my affair," she said. I let out one hard, empty laugh. Then what is he? The kitchen light hummed above us. Dirty snow melted in dark crescents around her boots. She swallowed. "It's my father." For a second, the words were too simple to understand. Your father died when you were 4. That's what my mother told everyone. The crying rose again. Elena pressed the phone back to her ear. Len, I'm still here. Mark is here too. She listened, her face crumpling. No, I'm not leaving you. It didn't sound romantic. It sounded like a child promising something too heavy to carry. She looked smaller than I had ever seen her, kneeling beside screwdrivers, old rags, and old work gloves. I found his letters after Mom's funeral, she said, in the cedar chest, under her quilts. He didn't abandon me. She left when he got sick, and then she let me believe he chose to disappear. I gripped the doorframe, the motel receipt. When I found his address, I called and dove to the house. I rented a room off the highway and sat there for 6 hours with his street written on a napkin, trying to decide whether I hated him. My throat tightened. The cash? His heat was about to be shut off. His license expired. He had no one. She looked down. And yes, I know. I should have told you. I stared at the phone. The papers? Medical forms. Power of attorney. Hospice intake. Her voice dropped. He has lung cancer. Mark. It's everywhere. The room went still except for that old man's uneven breathing on the line. I thought of the code and heard Ruck. The smoke. The cheap cologne. The long hug I had watched from my car. I thought of how quickly I had turned her grief into evidence. Why a secret phone? I asked. Because he can't use a smartphone. Because sometimes he forgets what year it is. Because my mother's name still sends him into a panic. She pressed the phone to her chest. Because I was ashamed that I still wanted a father. That was the truth that cut through me. Not a lover. Not a motel affair. A dying man in a cold mint greenhouse. And my wife split open by a childhood I had never known how to ask about. Len mumbled something I couldn't make out. Helena wiped her cheek with her wrist. Yes, she whispered. I'm bringing the papers. Then she looked at me. I'm sorry. I made you stand outside this, she said. But I can't let him be alone tonight. I nodded before I fully forgave her. My jealousy didn't vanish. It just had nowhere decent left to stand. Elena went upstairs to change, and I stayed in the kitchen with the toolbox open on the floor. The little phone sat beside a roll of electrical tape, a rusted screwdriver, and a hardware receipt. Ordinary things. Nothing like the secret I had invented. Just a sad pile of proof that I had built the wrong story and lived in it until it felt true. The furnace knocked in the wall. Sleet ticked against the window over the sink. In the dark glass, my reflection looked older than it had that morning unshaven. Eyes hard. One hand still clenched like I was waiting for somebody to swing. I opened my fingers. On the counter, Elena's pharmacy bag had tipped over. A bottle had rolled halfway out. The label full of words that made my stomach drop. Morphine. Nausea tablets. Antibiotics. The kind of medicine people picked up when hope had been narrowed down to comfort. I thought of our first winter married, when she crawled halfway under the porch with warm milk for a stray cat, whispering, "Nobody's asking you to trust forever. Just tonight." That was who she was. And still, she had locked me out. Both things could be true. That was the part I didn't know how to hold. The bedroom drawer opened above me. Footsteps came down slow. Elena returned in jeans, a gray sweater, and her old blue bad weather coat. Her hair was tied back, but loose strands clung to her cheeks. I can go alone? She said. I nodded once, then shook my head. No. Her shoulders tightened. I'm not saying I should go in, I said. I'm saying you shouldn't do like this. Mark, I know I don't get to pretend I handled this well. No, she said softly. You don't. I took that because it was true. My keys hung by the door. Brushing the old calendar with a dentist appointment neither of us had kept. Normal life was still there, waiting around like it hadn't noticed us breaking. I'm angry, I said. I'm hurt. I don't know what to do with what you told me. She held the medical folder tighter. But I'm not leaving you alone on this side of it, I said. Not tonight. For a moment, she only stared at the floor. Then she gave one small nod. In the mudroom, she bent to tie her boots. One lace was frayed, and she had to try twice. I almost helped, then stopped. Some kindness had to wait until it was clean again. Outside, the driveway shone black under the porch light. We walked to my truck without speaking. This time, when Elena climbed in beside me, she didn't hide the folder. She kept it on her lap in plain sight. Both hands over it. It was forgiveness. But it was a beginning. We didn't go inside right away. Rain tapped the windshield in thin, cold lines while the wipers smeared the hospital lights across the glass. Elena sat beside me with Len's medical folder on her lap, her hands pressed flat over it, like she was keeping it from flying apart. I held a paper cup of coffee I didn't remember buying. It was weak, burned, and almost warm. I'm sorry, I said. She stared through the fogged glass. I thought the worst. I made up a whole story and put you in the ugliest part of it. My throat tightened. I followed you. I checked receipts. I treated my wife like evidence. Her mouth trembled. You shouldn't have. I know. For a while, there was only rain, the heater ticking, and the automatic doors breathing open and shut across the lot. Then she whispered, I shouldn't have lied. I turned to her. I told myself I was protecting you. She said, rubbing the folder's bent corner. After all the fertility appointments, after my mother died, after every room we walked out of empty-handed, I thought if I brought you one more broken thing, you'd finally see me as the burden. That hurt worse than blame. Elena, I was tired of needing, she said, tired of being the woman with bad news. So I built one small place where I could be useful and not watch it hurt you too. And I was sleeping beside you feeling like a stranger, I said quietly. Tears slid down her face. She nodded. I can't do secret cash, hidden calls, motel receipts, and half answers. I said, not again. But I also don't get to control your grief just because I'm scared. She looked at me then, exhausted and open. What do we do? I picked up the crumpled parking slip from the cup holder and folded it between my fingers. No more separate lies disguised as kindness. You tell me before money leaves our account. You tell me when you're drowning. And you ask, she said, voice shaking. You don't investigate. I ask, I said. Even if I sound afraid. She wiped her cheek with her sleeve. Len thinks if you come in, it makes everything real. Me. Him. What he missed. Then he'll wait tonight, I said. Tomorrow he'll bring coffee. Even this terrible kind. A small broken laugh left her. Her hand touched the door handle, then stopped. Mark? Yeah. I don't know how to be someone's daughter this late. I set my cup down. I don't know how to be your husband through it yet, I said. But I'm willing to learn without making you carry the lesson alone. She nodded, hugged the folder to her chest, and stepped into the rain. I watched her walk toward the light, not shut out, not fully invited in. For the first time in weeks, it felt like truth instead of punishment. Len died 3 weeks later, just before dawn, while the lake was still black. Elena was with him. I waited in the hall with 2 coffees gone cold, finally understanding there are doors a husband can stand beside, but not enter first. After the funeral, we spent Saturdays at the mint green house. I tightened the bent mailbox and patched a porch rail. Elena sorted drawers, making piles for donation, trash, and things she was not ready to name. Blue paint dried on my hands and stayed under my nails for days. In the back of a linen closet, behind towels that smelled like cedar, she found a small frame wrapped in a grocery bag. It held a faded photo of her at about 6, sitting on porch steps in reed overalls. One front tooth missing. On the back Len had written, "My girl. Even if I only get to know it from far away." Elena sank to the floor. I sat beside her and let the old house creak around us. There was nothing useful to say. So? I put my painted hand over hers. That night, she made tomato soup and toast. Her phone rang once while we ate. She looked at the screen, then placed it face up in the middle of the table. "Church committee," she said. I nodded. "You want to answer?" "In a minute." Outside, snow melted off the porch roof into a pan I had forgotten there. Each drops often steady. We were not suddenly fixed. Trust did not return like a porch light snapping on. But the phone stayed on the table. My questions waited until they could come out clean. And between us, over 2 chipped bowls of soup, there was room for grief, room for truth, and maybe, slowly, room for us again.